my book review video this time on The Calculating Stars by Mary Robinette Kowal. This is a book in the Lady Astronaut series. Technically it's the first book, but she has written a novella that's a prequel. I'm not quite sure, I'm going to have to go and find out. There is a sequel to this called The Fated Sky, which I must go and buy. This is the American space program in the 1950s, told from the point of view of Elma, who is a woman, but time is different in this one. In 1952, a meteorite hits and destroys Washington DC and sets Earth on basically an extinction event. So it's now a race to get people out off the planet to colonize Mars and the moon to save humanity. This is fantastic. I loved this book so much. It's so readable. I flew through this in a couple of days. It's all told from Elle's point of view. She's a mathematician. She's a doctorate. Extremely smart lady. But of course she's a woman in 1950s America. And my God, what a sucky time to be a woman. You'd have thought by then things would have moved on. No, she's ignored. She's patronised. She's talked down to. And you know, it's just appalling. She's a pilot in her own right, a talented pilot, and she has to face sexist abuse and comments left, right and centre. And God, this book can really make you hate men. It really could. Thankfully, her husband's fantastic and wonderful and supports her and knows she's amazing and encourages her and keeps saying, look, you're going to do it. You're going to do it. I know you can do this. So he's really good. They're also Jewish, which after the Second World War and obviously the Holocaust and all that, she's feeling very attached to her faith and it connects her to her family. And it's part of who she is, particularly after the Second World War. She feels it's very important for her. And I thought it was handled really well. At no point did I think it was being shoved down my throat or anything like that. It was really, really sensitive about how a Jewish person would want to reconnect almost with their faith and keep it alive because so many weren't there to do so anymore. And it was quite moving at times, just being in the synagogue with Elma and going through like bar mitzvahs and remembrance with her and remembering how much Jewish people had lost at this point. So that was really nice, actually. And quite surprising. One other big thing that comes up in this is racism. Now, Elma, of course, is white. She is subjected to sexist comments and remarks, but she doesn't have to deal with the race card as well. And what's quite interesting is she knows lots of female pilots. They all served together in the war. Obviously they weren't allowed to see combat because women couldn't cope with combat, yeah, right. But they were allowed to serve in the war. They were put into situations that were dangerous. And of course, because they were women and they weren't supposed to be in combat, they weren't actually given any ammunition. So there's that whole discussion that crops up there as well. And trying to prove, you know, oh yeah, that totally did not happen. And the women are like, yeah, it totally did happen. And I had to do it without ammunition. Thank you very much. And of course, the guys are feeling threatened by this. And it's like, well, just treat them as equals for crying out loud. There's a lot of that. Anyway, back to the race point. She ends up moving in with a black couple and obviously starts discovering that actually her new friend is treated differently. And it's not until it's actively pointed out to her about the level of racism within the circles that she moves that she starts noticing it. And there's a couple of times where she says she's walked into a room and it's only because I've been told to look out for it that I'm aware that there are no black women in this room or no black people in this room or there's no black names on this list. And because it's been pointed out to her, she is 100% aware of it now. And so while this follows the space of program progression, it's also about Elma fighting for her basic right to be able to go to space. She's quite capable, she has the qualifications. The only thing holding her back is the fact she's a woman. So she fights for it. There's a lovely scene where she goes and chats to her black women pilot friends. And she's like, look, I want to do this. And one of the women turned around and says, I will not be yet another stepping stone for yet another white woman to make her mark. And I thought that was extremely powerful Because how often in history do we hear about white people who've done something, claiming to do it as a means of getting rid of racism and bringing equality in, but all it's done is elevated that white person and not actually brought up everybody else with them. And I think from that point on, Elma realises, I need to do better. And her whole focus becomes not about, you know, yes, she still wants to get into space, but not about, I must, you know, I have to be first in space. It's more of a case, I want to make it so everybody who is capable of getting into space can get into space. And there's some lovely scenes later on where, no, I won't spoil it, but there are some lovely scenes later on where she realises the good that she has managed to do by simply refusing to back down and accept the sexist status quo. So it's fascinating. Another thing I really like about Elma is she's not perfect. She, like I say, she needs racism pointing out for her so she notices it. She makes mistakes. She has to apologise. She suffers from anxiety. She has social anxiety. She's fine in a plane that's been hit and in stressful situations. That's absolutely fine. Dealing with a crowd of people? No, she can't do that. And for her, she's constantly been told this is a weakness, that she needs to think about what other people are going to think. And there's a very telling moment where she goes to see a doctor about it. And the doctor turns to her and says, you know, people say we're in the age of the meteor. We're not. We're in the age of anxiety, because he's seen a massive increase in people coming to him for anxiety. And so Elma starts to realise that actually it's not a defect in her. It's her body's way of reacting to something in a way it shouldn't be reacting. That it's okay to seek help for this. So I really liked that journey of her personal self-acceptance of anxiety and how it affects her and how she deals with it. I think that's the key bit. Rather than bottling it up like most of us women do, she deals with it. And she deals with it on her terms, and I love that. There is, obviously, because there is sexism in here, there is a complete arse in here. And interestingly, reading the author's notes, he was added in thanks to Brandon Sanderson. So, obviously, Brandon Sanderson knows how to write an arsehole. So there we are. But yeah, he really makes you want to punch him quite significantly. I mean, I don't think there's a character this year that I've met that I want to actually physically hurt quite as much as this character. But how Elma deals with him is very good. It also shows how much women at the time, and probably still now, have to suck it up dealing with a complete twat in front of them and biting their tongue and showing them up in their own way. There are lots of moments where the women show up the men, and they do it in such a clever way. And it's very reminiscent of how women still deal with sexist assholes. So there we go. There were many things I wanted to talk about in this book, but I can't because of spoiler reasons. And it's a real shame because this book is so enjoyable. I can see why it's won a Hugo and a Nebula. I can see why people love this book quite significantly. It's a very clever alternative timeline. There's been a lot of research in here. She's had scientists, she's had astronauts, she's had pilots looking at all this, helping her with the technical terms and the jargon, and it really feels like actual history. This could have been our history. And what's quite scary is that, yeah, we managed to go to the moon and we stopped. And you think, if we'd had the incentive, if we'd had the drive, we potentially right now could be living on the moon. We could be looking at colonising Mars. But because there was no drive, because there was no urgency, because of a lot of reasons that nearly cut the space program in this, we didn't bother. We left it. And I think it's a shame that space exploration and NASA and what everybody else around the world is doing is just pushed aside and ignored. It's such a shame that that drive and wonder for space exploration appears to just completely have vanished. We have some passionate people out there doing it, and they just don't get the support or the recognition of what they're doing. I mean, some of the stuff that these guys are doing today is amazing. And that certainly comes across in here, that it's not just the astronauts going out into space. There is a whole team behind them. That's something Mary Robinette Kowal mentions towards the end, that, you know, the astronauts are the tip of the iceberg. There are so many talented, creative, amazing people that get the astronauts out there. And they're the ones we should also be celebrating. So it's quite cool. Some people might say, oh, this is like Hidden Figures. No, it's not Hidden Figures, it's an alternative timeline, thank you very much. It might deal with the similar theme of women being totally ignored and erased from history, whereas I think Hidden Figures is all about the women that were ignored. This doesn't ignore the women, this is told from the women's point of view. This is about the women who were part of the space program, who fought to make change, who fought to become astronauts. And yeah, that's a whole other conversation. But, so it's not Hidden Figures. This is its own thing in its own right, in the same way that Hidden Figures is its own thing in its own right. Hidden Figures is based on actual people. This is totally fiction. But they do cross over into, they're both about the space program. They do both cover sexism, and they do both cover racism in various forms. But at the heart of this, I would say, this pushes the whole, we have to stand together as women if we want to make change. If we want to prove to the men that we are just as capable, if not more so, we can do it together. We have to do it together. Having not read Hidden Figures, I don't know how much of that is pushed through. Whereas I feel Hidden Figures is about actual women who sat there, who did their jobs, and then were blatantly wiped out from history because they were women or because they were black. And, you know, Hidden Figures, I think, is more a reflection of actuality, where this is inspired by actuality. And at the end of the day, this has a slightly more hopeful ending than Hidden Figures did. You know, those women were ignored for 70 years, 60 years, whereas these women refused to be ignored. They changed things massively, but it's amazing. So yeah, Calculating Stars, if you've not read it, please consider putting it on your list. It is, like I say, a really easy read. It is fascinating. It is anger-inducing, blatant male misogyny and sexism and all those things are really riled me up. It's a fascinating look at how white people aren't aware of racism and how they need it pointing out to them. That's really interesting and very relevant to today. So there you go. It's a fascinating alternative timeline, a brilliant what if. What if the world is going to die? What if we had to get off this planet? What would we do? And the hurdles that people who believe in something have to face. So I loved the Calculating Stars. I will be picking up the Fated Sky and blitz reading that because just awesome. So there we go. If you've read this, let me know your thoughts down below. Please try and keep it spoilerish free because I don't want to spoil it for other people. I went in not knowing much about this, so please don't spoil it for other people, but that would be really nice if you left your comments down below. So as always, the description box down below will have my social media links, GoodTubes, Twitter and Instagram. Come and say hi. There's a link to my book blog down there as well, which yes, I am attempting to keep up to date. Bear with me. I've had a bad back. Sitting at a computer is not great. And also in the description box you will find a link to a black booktuber, which I want you to go and watch, support, subscribe, click notifications, give them lots of love, please, because they're amazing. And as always, thank you very much for watching and happy reading. Be well.